I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because we are unpacking something truly transformative. Have you ever noticed how the language we use to talk about mental health can sometimes feel, well, clinical, cold, or even a little intimidating? Well, today we're looking at a framework that completely flips that script. We are going to explore how simple, universally understood agricultural metaphors can just completely revolutionize our approach to mental health and relational wellness. It's a fascinating shift from looking at what's quote-unquote wrong with a person to looking at the actual soil they're planted in. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the need for better soil. Second, nature's healing language. Third, the 5 RUMERTIME steps. Fourth, the seasons of growth. And finally, cultivating wellness across systems. Let's get into it. Starting with Section 1, the need for better soil, and a look at our global crisis.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Before we look at solutions, I want you to reflect on your own environment. Think about your home, your workplace, your neighborhood. In agriculture, a seed simply cannot thrive in toxic or depleted soil, right? So to understand the root of our current global mental health crisis, we have to look closely at the soil we are all trying to grow in. Traditional mental health care models do a whole lot of good, for sure, but they frequently fall short when it comes to serving culturally and linguistically diverse populations. Why is that? Well, because they're often built on Eurocentric models that just don't account for everyone's lived reality. They can be full of clinical jargon that alienates people, and they often carry this heavy burden of stigma. When care lacks cultural responsiveness, it just doesn't reach the people who need it most.
To put that into perspective, just look at this number. In the United States alone, over 150 million people live in designated mental health professional shortage areas. 150 million. That is a massive, urgent gap in care. It tells us that relying solely on traditional clinical therapy rooms, it isn't enough. We desperately need an innovative solution that is scalable, accessible, and culturally grounded. Enter the CSS framework, originally conceptualized back in 2015 by Dr. Yvonne Murray-Laurier. SEEDS stands for Supportive Engagement and Empowerment in Diverse Settings. This framework is honestly a brilliant solution because it seamlessly integrates neuroscience, cultural humility, and ecological systems theory into a highly accessible model. It doesn't ask patients to learn the complex language of psychology. Instead, it brings the language of psychology into the everyday natural world.
Moving along to Section 2, Nature's Language for Healing and Reducing Stigma.
Now, what's really fascinating about this is how powerfully language shapes our perception. One of the biggest barriers to mental wellness is stigma, right? On the left, where it's like maladaptive behavior or disorder can immediately induce shame. But on the right, shifting to nature-based metaphors completely restores dignity. Think about it. Instead of a disorder, maybe you're just having a normal survival response to depleted nutrients. Instead of systemic inequity, we can talk about toxic soil. It externalizes the problem and invites curiosity instead of judgment, which is a real game changer. So let's look at how this framework actually maps out these metaphors. Seeds represent your core competencies, things like self-awareness and decision-making. The soil, that's your environment, your home or school. Roots are your cultural heritage and foundational beliefs. Tree trunks symbolize your internal resilience and strength. And finally, fruits are the visible outcomes of your behavior. I want you to visualize your own environment for a quick second. What kind of fruits, maybe kindness and regulation, or perhaps isolation and stress, are being produced by the seeds planted around you? This brings us perfectly to a foundational quote from the framework's founder. In order to be effective, you must be reflective. We spend so much of our lives on total autopilot, just reacting subconsciously to our environments. To actually cultivate better fruits, we have to move to conscious, intentional engagement. And that, naturally, requires structured reflection.
Which leads us right into Section 3, the 5 RUMERTIME steps for conscious reflection.
So the crucial point is that before we can learn the steps of reflection, we have to define exactly what we are reflecting on. Enter the TIME acronym. We are constantly experiencing thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions. These 4 elements are the internal and external drivers of our behavior. They are literally the soil and the seeds of our daily lives.
And here is the incredible 5-step neurocycle that makes up RUMER. Step 1 is to recognize, noticing what you think and feel. Step 2 is to understand, actively exploring the historical and cultural roots of those feelings. Step 3 is manage, applying strategies to regulate yourself. Step 4 is express, communicating constructively. And step 5 is reflect, evaluating what you've just learned. Research actually shows that walking through these specific steps, like putting feelings into words, which neuroscientists call affect labeling, literally helps rewire neural pathways to reduce emotional reactivity. How cool is that?
Now for Section 4, the seasons of growth, looking at this as a cyclical model.
Because of course, healing isn't just a linear checklist. And this brilliantly illustrates how the rumor steps map right onto the cyclical seasons of nature. You might spend time in the quiet, sometimes really uncomfortable truth-telling of winter, which is the recognize phase. Then comes spring, where you understand your roots with fresh curiosity. Summer is the manage phase. It's hot, it requires intense effort, and frankly, a lot of emotional weeding. Finally, fall is when you express and reflect, reaping the harvest of all your hard work and finding closure.
If there is literally one thing you take away from this explainer, let it be this: growth takes time. You might go through these seasons multiple times a year, or you might spend years in a single season. Everyone's journey through this cycle is wonderfully, uniquely different, and honoring this rhythm completely removes the shame of feeling like you aren't somehow healing fast enough.
And finally, Section 5, cultivating wellness across systems.
Let's move to and see how this builds across our society. Because this framework removes clinical jargon and uses nature-based metaphors, it can be scaled far beyond the traditional therapy room. Notice the different levels of engagement here. This framework utilizes what's called task shifting. It empowers everyday people, parents at home, peers at school, managers in the workplace, and community leaders to become active sowers of wellness. You do not need a medical degree to help someone reflect on their thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions. We can plant these seeds at every single level of our social determinants.
We have covered a ton of ground today, moving from the need for better mental health models to actionable stigma-free tools like the RUMERTIME process. So I want to leave you with a lingering thought to carry with you. When you look at your daily time, your thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions, what seeds are you planting in your own soil today? Are they seeds of empathy and conscious reflection? I highly encourage you to keep exploring these concepts, step confidently into your current season of growth, and start cultivating your own wellness. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer.